Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. Let me begin by wishing you and yours a huge Happy New Year. I thought the first podcast of the new year should at least bring a smile or two to your face. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of chatting with comedian, author and presenter Adam Christing about his latest book, The Laughter Factor. While we all love to laugh, what role does laughter have in the modern workplace? Adam chats about the importance of laughter in the workplace, some of the do's and don'ts, and some tips and tricks you may use to introduce humour, even if it doesn't come so naturally to you. Adam says you can bring your people together with humour and heart. Let's hear from Adam. Adam Christing, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks so much, Greg. I love your title, Win Happy.
It's a simple idea. Like everyone else, you go on this big career trajectory trying to get to the next job and the next job. And of course, it's like climbing a mountain, and the view is going to be much better when I get up a little bit higher, and the rewards are going to be greater and all that kind of thing. And I remember one particular day, I was walking through Cork City in May. Beautiful, beautiful, sunny Saturday. It's my favorite time of the year, the promise of summer and what it will bring you and everything else. And instead of being overjoyed, I thought my head was going to burst. There was so much shit going on and work and everything else. Yeah. And I think at that moment, I thought, well, I'm not winning happy. I've got the big job. I'm not happy. And by one metric, you might say I'm winning, but in all honesty, I'm not winning. I'm not winning at all. So winning happy really is a philosophy about understanding what happiness is. And if you can achieve your goals and your objectives and satisfaction in your life, and you put those two little things together, well, that's a nice magic formula, if you can pull it off. And I think in a way, our quest on this earth, a lot of the time, is maybe trying to figure it out, making decisions along the way, learning lessons along the way, and hopefully getting to that place where you're winning happy. Just very simple, just a very simple life philosophy.
It's a wonderful philosophy. You've heard the phrase, some people are paranoia, and I try to be pronoia. So I believe that the world is secretly conspiring to make me happy.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, Greg, our lives are like a joke, meaning in a joke you have a setup and then a punchline. And I think we walk around, like if you walk around in this world feeling that you've already won, just by being alive and being healthy, and maybe you have family and friends, that gratitude premise affects your punchline. So now you start to get happy results. It doesn't mean everything's going to go your way. Whereas if I have this attitude of I'm losing, then I'm going to start seeing that punchline over and over again. When we change our stories, we change our lives.
It's a bit like, what version of yourself am I going to bring to the world today? And you're making a choice, aren't you? You're making a choice if I'm going to bring the Adam with a smile or the pissed off Adam.
Yes. And I'll be transparent with you. There are times where I need to receive what I love to give. So I think it's fascinating that I know over 100 comedians in my work, and many of them are not happy. My mom used to say, you can dish it out, but you can't take it. Sometimes we deal to others what we also need to receive. And I have to remind myself, I've written this humor book. I've done 4,000 some humor presentations. And sometimes I have to stop and say, wait, Adam, remind yourself, take a moment and be happy and feel the humor and enjoy. So I love your philosophy. It also seems like a mantra that we can repeat in our minds,
Absolutely. So I'm here with Adam. You're an author, presenter, a comedian, and a very successful one. And you've written a really, really interesting book, which I've had the privilege of having it physically in my hands and enjoying it over the last couple of weeks. It's called The Laughing Factor. And in a way, maybe it's a reflection on the world that a book like that even has to be written. But it had to be written, and you were the one who decided to write it. The 5 human tactics to link, lift, and lead. That's a powerful sentence. And even more so, I was on your website before we settled in. Of course, I was given your bio and all that kind of thing, and I've done a bit of reading about you. I just wanted to get a sense of you, and I wanted to hear your voice before you came on, just out of curiosity. So I was on your website and all of that. Bring your people together with humour and heart. I love that. I absolutely love that. In a way, and it's kind of pitched about workplaces. Can you imagine the opposite? And can you describe what the opposite is to me?
Well, I've seen it many times. Somebody, in fact, I think it was the famous P.T. Barnum, the great, circus publicity man. And he said about money, he said, money makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Yeah. I think in the same way, humor is a tool. So we can use it with sarcasm or mean-spirited humor, and so much political humor falls into this. And sometimes that can be appropriate with certain friends and family, but it can be very cutting. Humor almost always has a target of some kind. So what I hoped to do in the book is show really the bright side, and that really fits with your philosophy. And so my goal when I'm doing an event, for example, Greg, is not necessarily to be the star, but to be the orchestrator. So, for example, I'll be flying to Indonesia next week, and I'm only going to be on stage doing a performance for about 20 minutes out of a whole day conference. But as the master of ceremonies, I'm going to be listening for things that bring these wonderful people together in their work. And so I might highlight the way he dresses, if he's cool with it. I might highlight certain phrases that this manager that she has. I might poke some fun at the acronyms that this company gets into. And that kind of material would not play like at a comedy club. But for this group, if it all goes well, like I hope it will, we're going to have a shared experience where we're laughing together. And, Speech 101, they would tell you, read the room. I say, feel the room. What is the energy like? Are people connected? And it's not always easy. One time I was hired for a medical group, and they said, okay, this half of the room is at war with this half of the room. It's a big union dispute. We've seated the doctors on this side. We've seated the technicians on this side. And so the first thing I did was try to get people up in physical proximity together. So one of the little tricks I've learned from working in comedy clubs and theaters and churches and nightclubs, you name it, is to physically get people closer together. And, one of the challenges in doing Zoom, I feel like you and I have already become friends just face to face. But sometimes if you're speaking to, say, 100 people on a Zoom call, they can all look like little postage stamps. So I try to get people involved. But going back to your question, just like your perspective of when happy is, you can have a perspective that says, I have a sense of humor and I want to use it to bring people together rather than to feel superior.
In a work week, we spend, 40 hours working during the week. 37, 40, if you were doing a lot of overtime, 45. That should be enjoyable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It really should be. I was chatting to my daughter and her other half, Mark, he's a painter-decorator. And Ellen had to drop him somewhere because he was meeting one of his colleagues. And she watched the two of them drive off in their van. And she said she was looking at them from the back. So the two of them are in the van. She's looking at the back of both of their heads as they drive off. And she could see already their heads were going up and down because they were laughing at something.
And that's contagious. I mean,
yeah. Isn't that wonderful?
It really is. There's something, I don't know if you've heard of this. I've yet to experience it, but I plan to in the new year, laughter yoga, where there's not even a comedian. People sit around and someone starts laughing, and it's just this release. But I don't think it's as likely that that would happen to someone by themselves as it would with that connection. I don't think of her as a comedian, but Mother Teresa, the great humanitarian, said, a smile is the shortest distance between two people. Something happens to us physically, spiritually, emotionally when we're laughing together. And so my mission in this world is not to have people say, Adam's the funniest guy in the world, though I love to make people laugh, but more to say, we are enjoying ourselves so much. And it's very inviting. People want to, people say hang out with winners, but it's more likely you're going to want to hang out with happy people. So we're a combination of win and happy. It's like, but success without shared significance is quite empty.
One of the things in your book, when you're talking about people coming together in the workplace and creating humor, is collecting these fun, memorable moments. Something goes wrong, but you have a story from it, and even better if it's a funny story. So Mark had a particular story whereby they were painting a really upmarket house. Beautiful, beautiful mansion, beautiful house. And during the course of the day, they were in one of the bedrooms and they saw a very futuristic weighing scales. So the two boys were slagging each other as to who was the heavier of the two of them. So they both took turns on the weighing scales. Now, what they didn't know was that the weighing scales was connected electronically to the guy's Fitbit. So he's in work at an important meeting and his Fitbit is going off as the boys are weighing themselves. And even better, he was telling this story to my son. And my son is a movie director. And he has a movie called Christie that just came out this year. And he actually put that scene into the film. One of the guys is a painter decorator in the film, and he put that scene in. And it's a lovely scene. You can watch it on Apple TV. If you have Apple TV,
congratulations to him.
It's called Christie. It's loaded with humour. The film is based on the north side of Cork, which, now this is a bit of a generalisation, but there is a lot of social issues, a lot of poverty, a lot of drugs, a lot of people who've had very, very hard lives. But if you go up there, and I think it's a survival mechanism, you hear the quick wit and the humour out of the people there and the families, and it's just part of the culture. And Brendan talks about the film being a mix of the dark and the light. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He hits all of those dark social issues, but the sense of humour and everything else that is flowing through it. And we use humour, don't we, even in terrible times?
I think we need to laugh our way through difficult days. It's a point of view. It's a posture. But yeah, you think about, I guess they can call it gallows humor, or medical doctors or people serving in the armed forces see some brutal things. And sometimes you have to laugh so you don't cry. So I don't think that humor and sadness are necessarily opposites. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin. You know, I just lost my dad about 6 months ago. And one of the things that I cherish most about remembering him is he would tell those kinds of jokes that had like a pain and then a punchline. Like his favorite was, he would say, a man goes to the hospital, he's in the hospital bed, the doctor comes in and says, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. What would you like first? And the patient says, well, I guess I'll take the bad news. The doctor says, well, the bad news is your foot has to be amputated because of gangrene. We have to remove your foot. And the patient says, that's terrible. What's the good news? And the doctor says, the guy in the next bunk wants to buy your slippers. And so sometimes we have to, I think, acknowledge and receive the bad news before the good news makes much sense. Now, as a comedian, I'll tell you the worst introduction I ever received, Greg, and how I handled it. I was about to be introduced as a morning inspirational speaker, and the gentleman who was, by the way, this is a group of people, many of whom were about to be let go, and they were telling these utility workers that they were going to start taking extra funds out of their paychecks to support a charity. So it was like 8 a.m, so all the cards were stacked against me. And then the man introducing me said, before we bring on our special guest, comedian, speaker, I need to let you know that our wonderful manager, Tom Jenkins, 25 years manager, was killed in an auto accident, and services will be next Thursday. And now please welcome Adam Christing. That was the introduction he gave me, and it was not a joke. And so I looked out into the audience, and I saw people in shock and sadness and tears. And so I had to feel the room. And so rather than breaking into my comedy routine or doing a magic trick, I took a handheld microphone and started interviewing people about what did you love about Tom, and what will you miss about him? And so it took about 10 or 15 minutes to ease into the fun. And so being present, I've learned, is maybe the biggest secret of humor. Is, you've heard the saying, people are a keynote speaker. I want to be a keynote listener. In fact, I think my Irish grandmother shared a Irish proverb about, I can't do a good accent, but she had one, and she would say something like, God gave you 2 ears and just one mouth. It's just a reminder to listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah. What was your father's name?
Well, my grandfather was Brennan, and my dad was Paul Brown. So I'm a mix of these Tennessee people who moved to California during the big oil rush, and then a lot of Irish heritage. So I'm kind of a mutt.
Your dad's funeral, were people telling jokes after the funeral and chit-chatting and telling funny stories about your father?
Yes, my wife and I own a company, believe it or not, called Clean Comedians. And my dad, for probably 15 years, he was already retired from his Chevron oil career, but he would be on the phone booking comedians to schools and company events. And so a number of comedians came to honor him. And the way they honored him was they took the mic and they just told funny stories about one guy, Scott, is an impersonator, like an impressionist. And so he has my dad's voice down pretty good. So let's say you were the comedian, Greg. He would pretend to be my dad, and he would say, "Hey, Greg, it's Paul Brown. I've got an interesting one for you. Do you own a monkey suit? Now, this is not going to pay you any money, but it's great exposure, and I thought of you." And so it would go on and on about how terrible this gig was. And then at the end, he'd always say, "I thought of you." And that kind of humor of what I call in-jokes, of knowing the backstory, that allows us to be playful and tease and roast each other. If someone knows that you are really toasting them, celebrating them, then I think you have permission to roast them a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny. It's not funny at funerals, but people always lighten the mood. It's something that's very, very deliberate. Mm-hmm. And a horrible thing to say. But in a strange way, I think funerals can be enjoyable events, because in many cases that the person is celebrated. How old was your father?
He was 88.
My dad passed 7 years ago. He was 83. Mm-hmm. And there's some beautiful stories and some funny moments. He always had so much fun. He had so much fun with everyone.
Back to what we were discussing earlier, Greg, about the magic, the humanity of laughing together. I have a background. Many years ago, I was a youth minister. And so still sometimes people will invite me to officiate at a wedding or to be the, officiant at a funeral. And I'll tell you, I would prefer to do the funeral. And I think it's because we're in a place of our presence and memories, and also to reflect about life is short. Will Rogers, the great American humorist, said, life is short, get all the laughs you can. Whereas when I officiated a wedding, sometimes they're wonderful and beautiful, but there's a lot of stress, a lot of concern about how you look and the food and the timing and the photography and all this kind of stuff. A funeral might sound crass, but it's almost like we put the fun in the word funeral because we take the time to really think about what we've lost, who we've lost, and to celebrate them. And I have to be careful. There's some jokes. I was invited to speak at a person was an atheist, but they wanted me to do a lot of humor because this was a relative of mine. And I was tempted to say, it's an atheist funeral, all dressed up and no place to go.
I like it.
One go. I didn't do that one.
Yeah. It was on your head though. You had it.
Yeah, a lot of things shoot through my head that
I'm not going to say that now.
Right. Well, I've been very influenced. My grandfather, who I mentioned earlier, was alcoholic, and he would take me, even as a young man, to these 12-step recovery groups. And I thought these are going to be sad, hearing stories about divorce and death, but the opposite was true. I couldn't believe how much laughter and fun and warmth there was. And so he told me this saying, I respect wisdom, but I obey pain. When you hear someone's painful story, oftentimes there's a lot of humor in it, but there's also a lot of wisdom in it as well. So the point of my work is not to tell people, hey, be funny all the time, but more, I believe that humor is a shortcut to trust. So when I open up to you, like when you told me the story, I think you said was it your son? Who were the two heads that were laughing?
Yeah, so that was my son-in-law.
Okay.
And he was heading off to work with his buddy, his workmate.
Yeah. So by sharing that, I feel like you gave me a little window into your world, your family.
Yeah.
I call this authenticity, right? So if I poke a little fun at myself, and this is where as leaders, we have to be careful. As business people, we're not talking about self-defeating humor, like, I'm a loser, but more we give people a chance to, I like this phrase, intimacy is into me see.
Yeah.
So when I talk about how I once made a movie in Los Angeles, I was the director, the co-writer, and so I cast myself in the show. And Greg, my acting was so bad, I got cut out of my own movie. So when I tell a story like that, we laugh and people can feel like, oh, he's approachable. And so one of I call them laugh languages, is called poke. And it's the ability to use self-effacing humor and then to gently tease other people. It's the trickiest of the humor tactics because it can come across as mean-spirited. But like with you, I feel like in the conversation we've had during this podcast and chatting a little bit before, I feel like I could say something about your son-in-law, for example, like, is he still bobbing his head, or something? And we've created this little shared experience.
It is intimate, and you do have permission to be human.
Yes.
We were on a prospect call today, with this particular person, and there were three of us on the call. My God, there was no room for niceties. We were told at the very beginning, and of course it's work and efficiency and all that kind of stuff. I have half an hour, boom, and it was just one of those occasions where you knew there was 0 point at trying to have a little bit of chit chat, trying to humanize the conversation, make your presentation, tell me what you can do, and let's be done with it. And that's fine. That's fine. That's the way that meeting was conducted. But I think all three of us came off that call saying, we don't want to work with them.
Right.
It was just like, not interested.
Right.
Our engagement is going to be so transactional. And we say to clients in our presentations, we talk about win happy as part of our philosophy. And there's no point doing this if we're not going to enjoy it.
That's right.
And my little worktop here, and I'm just going to show you a little character. I'm not sure if you can see him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you heard of the soccer manager, Jurgen Klopp?
I've heard of him, but not super familiar.
Yeah. Well, when you get a chance, just Google Jurgen Klopp. He was a manager of Liverpool Football Club. And actually, the town of Liverpool is known for its humour. And the best thing to Google, actually, is his interview when he joined the club. And he's got the most colossal smile. the biggest laugh, a very, very passionate man about everything. It's a famous, famous interview. It's a famous interview that everyone talks about. At the time, there was another manager in England called Marino, a Portuguese guy, absolutely full of himself. And when he joined the club, he told the media that I'm the special one. I'm going to bring success to this club because I'm the special one. So Jurgen, when he was being interviewed, he was asked the question by the media, which he wasn't expecting, is that Marino said when he joined that he was the special one. How would you describe yourself? He was surprised by the question and he just stared at everyone with a big, big smile. He said, yeah, well, just call me the normal one. And he was the normal one for 8 years. The media loved him. The fans loved him. An extraordinary man.
You mentioned Liverpool, Greg, and though I've never been, I am, like so many millions in the world, a Beatles fanatic, right? And watching a recent documentary with George Martin, their producer, who signed them, arguably the most successful pop group in human history, right? Mr. Martin, why did you sign them? And he said, it wasn't the music. They were good. They were adequate musicians. He said it was their sense of humor. Yeah. They made me laugh, right? Like, I think their very first meeting, George Martin asked them, well, is there anything you don't like? And George Martin said, well, we can start with your tie. And there's something so winsome about humor. I can't, even though I've written a whole book on it, I can't fully understand it. I almost think it goes back to our cave-dwelling days where we would gather, and so it's sort of us against the world, right? There might be beasts out there or terrible weather or rival tribes, but when we're in here around the fire telling stories, we're learning lessons, but we're also creating community. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the word comedy and the word community have that same root.
Absolutely. Well, Liverpool, it's a working class city. While London and Manchester, they would have been the cities with the money. And Liverpool was the docks, port, lots of people, very working class, lots of immigrants from Ireland and probably Scotland. Hard city. Not a million miles away from that situation I was talking to you about up the north side of Cork. Now, it wouldn't all be like that, but if you get into a taxi in Liverpool, heading to a match, you chat to the woman in the coffee shop, you chat to the guys behind the bar, they all have that humour. And the Beatles, it's just part of it. And actually, I mentioned Jurgen Klopp. So at Liverpool Football Club, it's an amazing place to go to for a match. If you Google footage from the Kop, which is a famous stand where all the working class guys used to be piled in and piled high. The early days, you'll see lots of footage before matches of the crowd swaying from side to side, singing Beatles songs and things like that, So you get all of that in that working class city. So it's amazing. And again, the role that humour plays. Where are you from, Adam?
I grew up in Southern California, so a few minutes from Disneyland. And when I was about 9 years old, I had an uncle who lived in Colorado, kind of a mountain man. So our family would visit family in Colorado, and he lived by the river, and he liked to whittle and fish and all this stuff. But he started pulling coins out of my ears, like this is a bottle cap, but imagine like here's a coin. And as a kid, I started laughing. I felt surprised. So I got hooked on doing magic tricks from age 9. When I was about 17, there's a fairly prestigious magic club. I know in England, they have the Magic Circle. In Hollywood, they have the Magic Castle. And so I auditioned to become a junior member. I want to show you what this was like. I had this card. I'm in high school. I'm so nervous. My hand is shaking, and I can barely put the card in the secret compartment. And at the end of my audition, the wonderful woman in charge, Diana Zimmerman, she said, your magic is not that good, but you're funny. We're going to let you in. And 2 years later, I was assisting David Copperfield on a TV special. Yeah. So humor for me is magical. And so that I really grew up with a very strong kind of a church background, but also a strong comedy. I was exposed to juggling and magic and stand-up comedy and improv and even ventriloquism, just all these things. And so I've noticed that today in, let's just say in the West, it seems like vulgarity is the core of humor. But I believe variety is the spice of life and the spice of humor. And so it might be a silly dad joke, or it might be a funny skit, or a warm-hearted icebreaker, or like you telling a story about your son-in-law. So I've been very blessed to have worked with some of the greats like a Martin Short, and I've also worked with comedians who very few people have heard of. And so what I tried to do in the Laughter Factor is identify what are the 5 common characteristics. And what you notice is usually what makes you laugh, Greg, also reveals your laugh language. And so if you laugh with puns and wordplay, that might be your laugh language. And so you want to start sharing the kind of humor that makes you laugh.
I read that as a Q&A at the end of the book, some of the very, very important tips there. I think that was the very first one about that laugh language. And I think what you're really saying to someone is, if you're struggling around style and how you can apply a bit of humor, just your starting point is what are the things that make you laugh and make you giggle.
That's right.
And it can be the very dour person in the room who comes out with a little comment or a one-liner that has everyone buckled. The quiet person who says nothing, you kind of go, wow. And the other thing you speak about the book is the surprise factor. So that surprise factor can be from that quiet person who never says anything.
All of us can tap into the surprise element by simply pausing.
Yeah.
So let's say you're telling a funny story. If you pause an extra beat before you get to your payoff of the story or the punchline of the joke, what happens is you kind of draw the audience or your friends in, and then pow, you hit them with that punchline. I talk about this in the book, but there was a man in Hollywood, California, one of the great sleight of hand artists of all time. And he had that, I wouldn't say dour, but real straight face delivery. He was not known for his humor. And I kept noticing people busting up. Tourists would come into this store and they'd be laughing. And I thought, what? How's he? He's not telling jokes. He's not being silly. It's just, he was continually surprising them with these little magic tricks. So for your listeners, your viewers, it might be as simple as surprising someone with an unexpected gift or a card or a funny email. And you don't have to learn a joke or a stand-up comedy sketch. Just think about how you want to, I don't have one in front of me, but we found this prank that looks like an outlet, where you plug in your computer cord or something, and there's stickers. And so here we're about to celebrate Thanksgiving, right? So we sent out a fun Thanksgiving card to clients and friends, and we put in this prank, and people are already taking pictures of how they stick it up in their kitchen, and they ask their grandson, hey, could you plug in my phone? And they can't plug it in. Hit them with the power of the unexpected.
For Christmas, at a time when you did send your clients Christmas cards, instead of doing the usual Christmas scene with snow and everything else, we sent a desert picture with a cactus and the sun beating down. Yeah, and in the card we said the graphic designer has just been fired. Merry Christmas. Yeah, I don't know.
Years ago it was my birthday, and I got this birthday card from a comedian. I thought, that's so thoughtful of him. And when I opened it up, it had these flowers, and it was a sympathy card, and it said, sorry for the loss of your grandmother, my sympathy during this time. And I thought, this is crazy. And then at the bottom, it said, happy birthday, Adam. By the way, I can't spend all day trying to find the perfect card. And that gentleman, Greg, hilarious, Greg Hahn, he's one of the funniest comedians I've ever worked with. But I have remembered that's got to be 25 years ago. But yeah, he planted this little surprise. So as humans, I think we're pattern-loving creatures, right? So if you always dress a certain way, maybe wear something different. Yeah. Like what you did with that card, people are used to getting the Christmas tree and the snowy graphic, and you just flip the switch on them.
What I love about your book is that if you get to understand your laugh language, or your style, that's something that can feel comfortable for you, then you do provide a number of situations, a number of ways to apply that in different, like you mentioned the surprise with the gift. I think we spoke about that hilarious moment that we all spoke about. We had one client who, she wanted PR, loads of PR. That's what we do. We're the PR communications agency. And we were pitching her to media and said, you do know we need to get a photo call done. So we need to get a really great photograph. And with all of your profile pieces, we'll be sending this photo. No, don't worry. I've got a photographer myself. Yeah, I don't want to be using your gang. I'd like to work with someone I'm really comfortable with and all that kind of thing. Now, this woman, to be fair, she wasn't terribly glamorous. But anyway, she was advising legal stuff and all that kind of thing. So she sent a photograph in. Have you ever seen that movie, I think it's The Devil Wears Prada? And there's a picture, is it Meryl Streep, and she's the boss and she's posing over a desk. And she actually sent that photograph in with her face superimposed on the scene from a movie that we had all seen. But she wasn't joking.
Oh, really?
She was not joking. This is the photograph you use when you send this into media. We're still laughing about that in the office.
Yeah, that's kind of like a surprise that makes other people laugh, even if you don't get the joke, yeah.
And it's one of those situations where if there's a bit of tension in the office, or you've just hit a bad moment with someone, or there's a stressful conversation, you do have that in the back of your head that goes, oh, do you remember that client we had?
At that moment, I'm guessing that, you probably laughed, but that probably became a funny memory for your team later, right? Yeah. And so if that was me, I would, 6 months later, I would say, hey, Greg, I want you to see my new headshot. And I would put my face on that same thing, and it would call back to you that you'd have this rush of the memory from that. And so I don't know why this is, but something about what comedians call callbacks. And you just revisit something that was funny before. I think it makes us feel like we're insiders, like you and I have this secret password or code, and it really links our hearts. In the book I tell this story about, I live near a pretty hip art and music community called Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm a fan of this band that was never huge, but they're great, called King's X. They're kind of a heavy metal.
I've heard of them, yeah.
Fantastic. So I wasn't even conscious. I was wearing a King's X t-shirt, and I walked into this coffee shop with my wife. And this man, I thought he was going to hug me. I'd never met this stranger before, and I didn't know what, this guy money, or were we friends in school? And he just says, King's X. And so for the next 10, 15 minutes, which album do you like? What's your favorite song? And then we're texting each other the rest of the day, like it's, like a romantic crush or something from high school days. But it was just the fact that we both love the same. And so if you find someone is into your kind of music or movies or sports or puns or whatever it is, you can build a humor bond. I think, Greg, the best way I could put what I discovered in writing the book is that just like your win happy philosophy, humor is a bridge that we walk together. So it's not really the goal. The goal is not always just to get laughs. It's to create this shared experience. Like you noticed on my website, it's laughing together, not laughing at, but laughing with.
And it's funny, you're talking about wearing the T-shirt, and immediately when you've told me that story, now I read that in the book, it triggered a number of things for me. First of all, wearing something that surprises someone, back to that surprise factor. It doesn't necessarily have to be funny, or in your case, it wasn't. It was just a band you were following. But being prepared to wear something that makes you stand out a little bit. We had a team day, and our graphic design department, the 4 guys, there's 20 of us in the team. And it would be 70% female. And when it comes to the timetable for the day, there always has to be a lot of time for people to get ready before dinner. The women want loads of time before dinner to get ready. It's nearly like a contest as to who looks best, or else they just want to make sure that they put the best foot out or whatever. So the four boys in the design department come in and they're all wearing Hawaiian shirts, one louder than the next. And
Right.
they deliberately came in together for impact. It had everyone roaring around because some of the characters you would never in a million years imagine them wearing anything as outlandish as that. It was really, really funny. We all shared those photographs of the four guys. Those four guys are forever bonded by that photograph and the bond that they created by just that moment. And I was thinking about that reading your book.
My wife and I were getting our house painted when we first moved here, and I didn't know the painter at all. Someone had recommended him. And I noticed every time he came to paint our house, he had a funny shirt. And one of them said, ask me about my vow of silence. I thought, this guy's pretty funny. We've become friends. We play chess. We listen to music. We have an occasional cigar. And it was because he made me smile. I'm like, this guy's not just a painter. He's got a sense of humor, and we've become friends. And so it's just a wonderful way to, I would put it this way. It's like a magnet where you're saying, I want to be connected to you. Like, you and I have never met in person, but I feel like, wow, if I get anywhere near Greg in Ireland, I would love to, have a coffee or a beer with you. Actually, I don't drink anymore, so it would be a coffee. But
we have non-alcoholic Guinness now. There is 0.0 Guinness. I know it's incredible. It's a sin, but we have it. Yeah.
That's great.
This is the world we live in.
Yeah.
The most important message I got from your book, and the tactics and the situations and the examples, my God Almighty, it teaches you more than anything the value and the role that laughter and smiling can play in work situations or any situation. Why did you write the book? What made you write it?
I wanted people to see that everyone has a sense of humor. If you think you don't, it just means maybe you've buried it, right? And so I've never shared this on a podcast, Greg, but I want to tell you my favorite part of the book is at that very, very end where I kind of reveal what is the laughter factor, and it's you. It's being yourself. It's finding harnessing your sense of humor. So I wanted to give people practical tools to do that and examples. And so I try to start each chapter with a joke that illustrates that humor tactic. But I also wrote it for leaders because today, more than ever, leaders feel so responsible to cast the vision, to manage the team, to motivate the troops, if you will. But what leadership is about, in my mind, most of all, is it's the currency of trust. And because I believe humor is a shortcut to trust, if you're in business in any capacity, whether you run a one-person operation or multiple employees, humor is it's free and it's fun and it feels good,
Yeah. For the person in the business environment who has the responsibility of leading and creating that atmosphere, and they're not the funniest person around, or they're struggling with that, I think in your book, they might read all of that and say, well, yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with that. In a way, for me, what your book has been amazing for is to illuminate to that person the role of humor. And while you mightn't be that person, I do think you need to work hard to create that environment where people smile, where they're comfortable in laughter, and you don't have to be the funniest guy in the room, but you need to allow that to flow.
We talked earlier about the Beatles, and I never really talk about this, but I'm working on another book that's completely different, and it's about Bob Dylan. And the back of the book, the headline says, Bob Dylan can help you find your voice, even if you can't stand his.
Yeah.
In the same way with humor, you can use humor even if you feel you don't have a sense of humor. Like Bob Dylan is maybe one of the most influential singers of the last, say, 60 years. And most people would say he doesn't have a sweet pop sounding voice. But what he did was he let people see, like, wow, if he can sing, suddenly I'm Bruce Springsteen or whoever. And I go, well, I could do that too. And so one of the things I want people to see in the book is that you can put the spotlight on your people in business or your customers or your vendors. So sometimes the other day they said, Adam, stall is a big corporate gathering. They said, stall, we need to fill 15 minutes. And I just thought, well, here's what I'll do. I just ask the attendees, they're in round tables. I said, have each person around the circle share the first car you ever drove. Now, that's a serious statement, serious question, but hilarity ensued because somebody said, well, it was my grandpa's tractor. And then somebody else says, I stole my mom's car when I was 15. And so some of the stories were actually very sweet and endearing. You know, my father gave me my first car, whatever it was, but just getting people talking. So as a leader, I might put it this way. You can be a facilitator of fun, even if you're not a comedian.
Talk to me about culture and getting the humor right when you're not exactly sure. And in work environments in particular, you can see, like I was talking to you earlier about, you know, in Ireland and stuff, humor is just part and parcel of everything. You get away with it. But you really don't want to cause offense. Have you got a little rule of thumb?
I say avoid three things, 3 P words, not the word P itself. Politics, because at least in the United States, and I'm sure it's this way in Ireland and many places, but it divides. So I avoid politics. Next is profanity. My mom used to say fun is not a 4-letter word. So there might be situations where people are not offended by profanity, but if in doubt, leave it out. And then the final P is any kind of prejudice. And that could be racial, that could be religious, that could be about someone's weight or the color of their skin. Now, when people hear that, they're like, well, what's left? What's left to make fun? But there's so many things. There's exaggeration, there's storytelling, there's poking fun at yourself, there's the inside jokes that we've been talking about, there's planting surprises. I probably have 3 hours of material that I can do, Greg, but I can pull out the right piece for the right moment. So I might look at this group and I might say, oh, these are all accountants. Let's do some kind of a trivia game show we're going to give away, and I'll give away the silliest prizes. And it might be a very successful Fortune 1000 type company. But if I give them, I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but I would give away a Blockbuster gift card. You know, and Blockbuster in the United States, at least, went bankrupt 20 years ago. Silliest thing for these super successful people. They're like, hey, thanks a lot. And so it's pulling out the right thing at the right moment. Now, here's a secret that I do want to share with you. I think one of the all-time great humorists was Mark Twain, who used to get paid to lecture, and people would come. It was like the stand-up comedy circuit of his day in the United States. And he said this. He said, it takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. So recently, in fact, this shop is in England. I think it's called Prop Dog, but I bought this little sponge donut, put it in my pocket. It collapses real tight. And I was at a 5-star resort where they just kept serving cakes and donuts and treats and everything. And I just said, I'm so tired of it. It did take something to go, and I pulled it out of my pocket. Huge laugh. Again, that wouldn't play at a comedy club, but in that context. And so I prepared that joke by watching and listening what was happening in the room. And then I do travel with a little bag of tricks that might have some props, a deck of cards, but that's my style. I like to surprise people. Other people, and if you learn a good joke, I mean, really learn a good, clean joke and bring it out at the right time, you'll be surprised at the impact that can have. It might be at the beginning of your sales presentation, might be to break the ice, like when COVID was such a factor and we were shut down from live events for quite a while. I would say during the pandemic, I sanitized my hands so many times. I actually found the answers to my 8th grade Spanish quiz. people can relate to what they're going through. And so that was kind of a long, rambling answer, but my main point was preparation. Like, this is a better way of saying it, Greg. Planned spontaneity. Now that you've told me a couple stories about your background, like about the photo, about the bobbing heads, I'm thinking, okay, if I ever get the privilege of meeting Greg in person, I'm going to surprise him by, like, if I showed a picture of me as the woman on Prada, if I put that face on there, you would just automatically laugh, I think, because you're like, how did he remember that? Planned spontaneity.
I think in a way, if you, one, understand the role of humour and how it can change an environment, you have to acknowledge that to begin with, and then look for the humour. Find your laughter language and then look for it yourself. What's happiness to you?
Happiness is giving and receiving love.
And what's winning happy to you?
Winning happy means accepting what's happening as for my good. So life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. And as long as I'm breathing, I'm lucky to be alive. And then if I can give to other people, the success takes care of itself.
And most importantly, where can I get the book?
All over the place. Amazon has it. By the way, if your friends and listeners go to this site, thelaughterfactor.com, don't forget the word thelaughterfactor.com, in 4 minutes, they can take a quiz and it'll help them identify their laugh language.
Okay, fantastic. And as well as books, I know you do speaking gigs and everything else. So
yes.
Yeah, you are available.
And I do hope we meet in person sometime, Greg. You're a delightful conversationalist.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and cheering me up on a Monday evening.
Let's keep those heads bobbing.
Absolutely. Think of the two painters and the weighing skills they may or they may not
I love it.
Try out. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Bye, Adam. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.